Welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast, a podcast about women who work in sports. I'm your host, Jahaan Blake. After 15 years of working for 3 major league teams, including the Boston Red Sox, Los Angeles Dodgers, and the Chicago Cubs, I discovered the one thing I loved the most was helping women in sports shatter glass ceilings and take their seat at the table. I loved it so much that I made a business out of it. I have the honor of coaching high-performing women in the sports and entertainment industry and supporting them as they go after exactly what they want in their career. So if you are feeling tired of waiting on the sidelines, done being overlooked for promotions, and you're ready to pull ahead of the pack and take your career to the next level, girl, I'm here for it. I also created the Game of Her Own podcast to support you as well. We are here to share the stories of incredible women who work in sports and entertainment. These leaders and trailblazers will inspire you with their success and the lessons they've learned along the way to the top. Ladies, there is nothing like women empowering women. I am so honored you're here. Let me ask you some questions. Have you ever tried to get your foot in the door of a professional sports team only to be told no because you don't have any professional sports experience? Yeah, I know. You're probably rolling your eyes. How about this one? Have you ever wondered what your first few months in a new role should look like? Today's guest, Caitlin Hartley, Director of Game Presentation for the Dallas Wings, talks about all the things, how she made the jump from collegiate to professional sports, how she approaches the interview process, how she made the jump from manager to director, and what those first few months in the job look like. The importance, I love this one, the importance of bragging on yourself. And ladies, the list goes on. Make sure you stay to the end and listen to what she would do differently in her career and how she's being intentional about using that lesson to make an impact in her role now. I'm telling you, it could be a game changer for your career. We hope you enjoy. All right, Caitlin, welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast.
Thank you. Excited to be here. Excited to talk to you.
Good. Us too. All right. So we want to learn all about how you got to where you are now and all the lessons you've learned along the way. But before we get there, take us back in time to little Caitlin and when you I'm assuming it's little Caitlin, and when you fell in love with sports.
My parents had 4 girls. My poor dad, he really wanted a son so badly. Then that 4th girl came and he was like, okay, I give up. I'm not trying anymore. So I felt bad. And so he would watch football on Saturdays or late at night, and nobody would want to watch with him. And so I was like, you know what? I'll just watch with him. He's got nobody to hang out with. So I was just trying to be nice. And then I started to get interested and ask him questions about the game and be like, hey, why aren't there any girl referees? Or why aren't, just asking him just questions about lack of females that I would see represented on television. And the more we hung out together, the more I became interested in it. And so when I got to college at the University of Florida, I was all about sports. And my parents both went to the University of Florida. My dad's dad went to the University of Florida. So it was kind of almost a given that I was going to go there. So I went to all the football games, all the basketball games, anything I could, really go to, I wanted to. One of my best friends, she was telling me, and she was going to LSU at the time, and she was telling me how she started, interning in their athletic department. And I was like, you can do that? That's so cool. I want to do that. I love sports. I want to be on the field. That sounds really cool. So I didn't know what I wanted to do in sports. So I just emailed a bunch of emails from the staff directory. I was like, hey, I would love experience. I don't have a particular field. I'm kind of trying to test out anything. And the only available department was the marketing and promotions department. And they're like, yep, we have unpaid internships. Come on by. And that's how I got started.
Wow. So your dad's influence, poor dad, 4 girls, but then you stepped up and actually then started taking interest in what was going on. And are you the oldest, youngest?
I am the second oldest. So I have one sister who is 2 years older than me. And then my 2 other sisters are both younger than me.
Okay, got it. And then where did you grow up? What town? What state?
So I grew up in Florida. Good question. I grew up in Florida. I was born in Sarasota, Florida, like right near the Tampa area. But then we kind of moved around because my dad worked in the newspaper industry, which, as you know, is a dying industry. And so, every couple of years, a branch would close or he would get relocated to another location. And so we would have to move around a lot. So I was in Sarasota. I moved to Louisiana for a couple of years, lived there because my dad worked for their newspaper company, moved back to Florida. And now my parents are in Pensacola. And that's actually where I graduated high school. So my last 2 years of high school were in Florida.
Okay. Got it. So dad's influence, and you grew up in Florida. And What was your team?
My team, great question. So it's always the Florida Gators, just because both my parents went to the University of Florida. So mostly I was interested in college, which is funny now that I work in professional sports, but I was just so invested in college athletics. Mm-hmm. And I would watch professional, because I lived in Louisiana for a few years, I loved the New Orleans Saints and I would root for them. But for the most part, the Florida Gators were my team, never missed a game kind of thing.
Good thing my husband isn't here because he would not be excited about the Gators. He's FSU, so okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I
get it.
So tell everybody what you do now and who you do it for.
So I am the director of game presentation and live events for the WNBA team, the Dallas Wings. So they are located actually in Arlington, but they've been here for only 5 years. This is their 5th season. And I just started in February. So haven't been here super long. I've actually been in quarantine longer than I worked in the office, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, this is my first role in professional sports. I'm so excited to be part of a women's professional sports team. That was kind of a super big milestone for me and something I was definitely searching for. Been here for not that long, but loving it so far.
All right. So you're the new girl on the block.
Oh, yeah.
Right. All right. So congratulations are still in order.
Thank you.
How did you make that jump? So you were in college athletics, and I know you had a quick stint in nonprofit, then you took on this role in professional sports. So how did you make that jump? What would that look like?
So I worked at Stanford for 3 years and I loved it. I could not get enough of it. The people were great, which to me is super important. I worked for all these different teams, which was good and bad. So I loved it because I got to experience so many different sports, got to help out so many different players and student athletes. But the downside was I just felt like I was never giving one team 100% of my time. Because football would overlap with basketball, which would overlap with volleyball, which would overlap with baseball. And I just felt like I was not dropping the ball per se, but I felt like I could do more for a certain team, but I just didn't have the resources or time. So it was getting to be a little bit of a discouragement somewhat because I felt like I wasn't fully doing what I could for these teams. And on top of that, there was never a break. So all the seasons would overlap with each other. And so by the time summer came, it was like, okay, time to ramp up for football, start planning. And my baseball season had just ended in June. And so it was basically year round and there was no time to sit and take a breath. So finally, I wanted to try to get out of it for a little while, take a step back and see if I could try to do something else, which is, like you said, my small stint in nonprofit. I worked for this nonprofit that puts on events for San Jose, which is a city close to the Bay Area. Did that for a year. And I will tell you, the whole time, I actually never truly left Stanford. I was still working for them part-time, doing events for them on the side, which my whole office at Stanford, that was hilarious. They're like, you left to take a break and you have yet to take a break. You're still working part-time for us, because I love to be on the field for games. I love to just help when I could. So I was like, this is a great point. Why did I leave? And so I sat down and I really thought about it. And I was like, I do love sports. I know I do. I love making an impact on the game. I love when people are leaving and they're saying, oh my gosh, it was so fun. They don't care about the outcome. They just loved the time that they had. And I missed that, which is why I started working at Stanford part-time during my new job. Mm-hmm. But then I was like, I can't keep doing the year-round kind of thing, because that's where the burnout was truly happening. And so I decided professional was probably the best way to go. Like I could still be in the sports world, still be putting on these events, but maybe getting a little bit of a break and also being able to truly focus all my time on just, one team. Mm-hmm. And so I started looking all around for professional teams, but unfortunately, a lot of professional teams don't want to hire you unless you have professional experience. So I know I interviewed for a lot of different places. I got to like a final round with the Charlotte Hornets and I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. But then they went with somebody who had professional experience, which was like a heartbreaker. And so I was like, I don't know what to do. Like I'm trying. And then I see this team in Dallas, a WNBA team. And I was like, oh my gosh, this could be it. Like this could be it. And it's a women's team and they're still pretty new to the area. And I ended up getting it. And it's been like a dream come true. So I'm super excited about it.
Yeah. And you were willing to move. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, I was, which was crazy because I loved California. I'm a big hiker, the outdoors. I loved it there. But one, it was very expensive. So I do not miss the cost of rent.
Sure is.
But two, I have found that I don't ever want to limit myself by saying I can only live here, because I have found that working in sports, that's almost impossible, because if you really want to do what you love, you kind of got to be willing to move for it. So, I worked in Clemson. I had never even thought of living in South Carolina, but it was Clemson. So I went and worked there. And then I was like, oh, Stanford, that's even farther across the country. But I never really thought much about it because it just seemed like a great opportunity. So I've almost always been willing to move. A few circumstances where it might have been impossible, but most of the time I think being willing to relocate is super prevalent to kind of moving your career forward.
Yes, I agree. For somebody, I came from Boston to LA to Chicago. And I loved moving from team to team because I liked the idea of coming in and helping and creating a new program and then saying see you later and doing it somewhere else, which is why I became a consultant and coach. But there's something fun about it, and it's all for your career.
Yes.
Yeah. So
definitely.
It wasn't until I met my husband that he finally settled me down.
I'm grateful because my husband had a job at Stanford too. And so he has been really supportive for me to pursue what I want to do. And thankfully, Dallas is such a big area that I don't fear that he won't find something. So he works in sports as well. And so I have a feeling like we could both find something together. Almost everywhere we've moved, he's always worked either in the same organization or like a nearby one, also in sports, which has been really great.
I love that. So he had a job at Stanford and you got your job with the Wings and he said, let's go, let's do it.
Yeah. So he stayed there for, I think, like 2 more months. But after that, he came and it kind of worked out because Stanford was downsizing because of COVID. And so he was like, well, this is, good timing anyways. So he came and now he's here with me in Dallas and he has been super supportive. He knows how much I wanted to get back into sports. And so it's always been kind of fun that we can do these types of things together and support one another.
I think that's great. And I do hear from women from time to time, like, oh, I don't know if I can move. I don't know if my husband or boyfriend, partner, wife, whoever it is, it's just, it's hard, right? It's hard to make that move with a partner because their career and their dreams are also kind of bundled up in you moving.
Yes. Well, I got a job offer before this one, this minor league baseball team, like way up north, like in Philadelphia or near Pennsylvania or something like that. And I considered it because it was professional sports. It was getting back into the sports world. But we looked at the area. There weren't a lot of other teams. There weren't a lot of other opportunities. So we ended up turning it down. And I was like, I'll wait for something in a better area where we could both find something that we both could succeed at. And so definitely trying to find the balance, like not just taking the first opportunity and just making sure that you can both succeed in wherever you go.
That's really thoughtful. So you're just, okay, I'm not going to take this because it just doesn't work for both of us.
Correct. Yes.
He's willing to make the move. You're being a great partner in the sense that you're making sure it's helpful. It's a move that's smart for both of you.
Yes.
Talk to us and tell everybody, about your approach, your interview style. That whole process is very stressful. Like just applying and tailoring your resume and cover letter to get in, right? Just to get someone to notice you. And then when you get the phone call, you have to balance that. I'm grateful for the phone call, but I want you to pay me my value, and I want the job, and I have confidence, and I'm good at what I do. So there's a lot of things that you have to juggle emotionally there. So just talk us through that process and give any advice to women who are listening.
That's such a good question, because I did have so many interviews when I was trying to get back into sports, and I found some things worked really well and some things didn't. So one of the things I found was that if I go into it with the mindset like, oh my God, I need this job. If I don't get this job, I'll just die. Like, it always doesn't end up very well for me. I have to just go in with it with an open mind and be like, this would be a great opportunity, but if I don't get it, this is not the end of the world. So that way it just calms my nerves. I go into it with like a positive energy and just a lot more relaxed on my end. Because I found when I have like heightened just like anxiety or just, stress about wanting it so badly, that I just don't interview as well. So that's one of the biggest things. And then another is actually listening to the interviewer. I have found is huge. Like, sometimes you're so nervous that your mind is going a mile a minute and you're trying to just think of the best answer for their question. So you're not listening to their responses to your answers, and you're not truly having a conversation with them. You're just waiting for their question so you can answer it the best. But when I interview the best is when I'm actually hearing what they're saying. I can either riff off of something they say, or I can comment on a little anecdote that they just gave me and relate to it. And that way you're forming a relationship with the interviewer. You're more likely to have a lasting impression on them. And when they're reviewing all the candidates, they'll be like, oh, that Caitlin, like, she was really easy to talk to, and she seemed like she'd be great with our other employees. And I have found that just like making it more personable and truly listening to what they're saying rather than just waiting for the next question has always helped me a lot more.
I love that. So actively listening, right? And
for sure,
being present for that conversation, because if you're in your head thinking about what the answer should be or what you should say, which we all often do, right? You can't help it, right? We put so much pressure on ourselves. We're all very ambitious, right? So it happens all the time. So I love that. What other tips would you share with women?
I guess just don't be afraid to brag about yourself. That's something I felt like I did a lot. Like, I was just shy because you don't want to sound full of it or conceited, which is so silly, because I feel like, men never have to feel like that. And just don't be afraid to show like, hey, these are the things that I've accomplished. And this is how I can apply it to this role. And I was in charge of this many people, and I did all of these things on this list. And just being able to truly show your abilities, what experience you have, is going to go much further than you being like this humble, nice person. Not that you have to be mean, but just like show confidence in what you've done, and it'll go a lot further.
Yeah. So brag on yourself. And for you were going from manager to a director role.
Yes.
Right. So that's a big deal.
It was. And I was very nervous that they were going to think I was not qualified. It's not that I wasn't, it's that I thought they wouldn't think, because prior to my manager role, I was only an associate director at Stanford. So I had never been a director before. So I was a director for a WNBA team. So I was nervous that they would see the title before actually talking to me. But thankfully that was not the case. And even though the title was something that was daunting, everything in the job description I knew how to do. And so that's what you have to convey in the interview is like, hey, I saw all these qualification needs. I saw all these things that, responsibility wise, I'm supposed to tackle, and I know how to do them all. And here are the examples of when I've done them before.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. So how do you get over those nerves? That's what everyone's listening right now. They're like, yes, I get nervous too. What do you do?
Oh, that's such a good question. One, I try to prepare. So if they say you're going to be interviewing with these people, I look them up. I see where they went to school. I see what experience they have. I don't try to get too creeper stalkish or anything like that. But it's nice to come in prepared, and it's nice to just feel a little bit more like, hey, I've done my homework. You know who you're talking to. If there's a lull in conversation, you can bring up some topic that you saw about them from their LinkedIn or, whatever. But I definitely try to prepare in advance. And then I also, the night before, I don't do anything work related. I try not to. I try to just read a book or watch a Netflix show, because if I stay up the night before, doing a bunch of research or maybe looking up interview questions and rehearsing them, I find myself the next day thinking about, okay, what was a good answer I thought of? And then I'm not, participating truly in the interview. So the night before, I try to really relax and kind of blank out my brain a little bit. And then I always seem to do better and come in a little bit less nervous the next morning.
Oh, those are good. So prepare. And what I'm hearing you say is prepare early, in the sense that not the day before the interview.
Correct. So 2 days before, 3 days before, do your research, maybe find out more about these people, find out about the organization, which is something I feel like people don't do enough, is research the team, find out their record last season, find out some of the players. Definitely still do that, because that's going to go a long way when you can actually talk about, oh my God, yeah, your team did so great last year. I hope they can repeat it this season, rather than you going in and not knowing a single thing about the team or the organization. So definitely do your research. And then just the night before, if you feel like you're ready, you should be ready, and don't try to stress over the minutia and the little details. So next morning you'll come in a lot more at ease.
I like that. And then I love what you said. You have topics basically on reserve, just in case there's an awkward moment and no one's talking. That is fantastic. I might start doing that sometimes. I have conversations with people and I'm like, I don't really know where to go with this. That's a great one to have, because people always worry about it. So now you are prepared. You're prepared early. You have self-care the night before, and you're investing in yourself emotionally, spiritually. And then you have these reserved topics. People get nervous about the quiet.
Yeah, I hate awkward silence. I truly do. And so having something in my back pocket to get out of the awkward silence is something I always need.
Okay, good. How about, do you ever practice practice some questions and answers out loud?
Oh, for sure. I definitely do that. My husband's great at being a fake interviewer. He's been in that role many times. But if he's not there, I'll just think it to myself, and then I'll try and just come up with my answer off the top of my head. I don't like to write it down, because if I write it down, then I'll try to memorize my words, and then it just comes up more jumbled. So it's still good if it comes out naturally, but rehearsing the questions and maybe even just certain talking points has definitely helped me. So I know a common question is, what's one moment working in-game presentation or fan experience that you're really proud of? It's almost always a question for me. Knowing what that experience was and being able to have talking points about what that was in my head is much better than coming in and them asking and me trying to think about it on the spot and taking 6 minutes trying to understand, oh, I think it was this time 5 years ago when I worked at Florida, and just having something more prepared.
Yes, I agree. And then it's okay to use that same story all the time. Even if you go on a second interview and it's a different person, same organization, that moment hasn't changed, right? Your favorite moment, your proudest moment, still your proudest moment. Tell that story again and share it. And then what I always like to tell my clients, and I don't know if you've done this, is practice on Zoom and record yourself.
Oh, I love that idea. That's a good idea.
Thank you. So that way you're seeing, you play it back and then you see yourself and you're like, okay, I keep touching my hair. What is that? I look really nervous, but I'm not nervous. I'm home by myself. So you start to see yourself. And then when you're talking and you've rehearsed, you've talked about, you're prepared, the words come off of your mouth. It's just so much easier.
100%. That's a good idea. Recording yourself is so smart, because I remember one time, it was the first time I ever ran a meeting. I was at the University of Florida and I was still very young, first time in their athletic department, and I was in charge of a meeting. And I clicked my pen the whole time, and I didn't know it because it was just a nervous tick. And then later I went to my supervisor. I was like, hey, how'd I do? She's like, you did great, but you would not stop clicking your pen. And that's all I could focus on. And I was like, oh no. That's such a good idea to record yourself so you can give yourself that feedback. That's brilliant.
Well, thanks. I feel like we have a little masterclass going on here.
I know.
Tell us a little bit more about the negotiation process, right? You get an offer, and just how did that whole process go?
I used to be terrible. Like when I got to Stanford, I did not negotiate at all. And that was, 4 or 5 years ago now, but they gave me my offer and I said, okay, because I just wanted to work for them so badly. And I was just like so excited. And I was just like, sure, yes, whatever you say. And I didn't negotiate at all. And then I got to the nonprofit and I actually did negotiate with them. They offered me this and I said, you know what, like I'm leaving sports and I'm very excited for this opportunity, but the Bay Area is very expensive to live. And I I was very honest. It was hard because you always feel a little bit awkward or uncomfortable asking for more money, but you just have to remember like, hey, the worst they can say is no. And then you can reevaluate if you want it or not, because that's the scariest part. People don't realize it's just a no or a yes, and then you can reevaluate. And so once I realized that, it became a lot easier to do that kind of process. And then the same thing happened for this job in Dallas. They offered me a certain amount for compensation, and then I asked for more, and they kind of met me in the middle, and I was kind of expecting that. So I asked for a little more than I was like willing to, to accept, because I was like, they're gonna, cut that increase in half. And I kind of know that they're gonna do that. So then I, just bumped that up to what I wanted half of that to be.
That's good. You couldn't see me, everybody, but I was clapping, which was making her laugh. But yes, that's so strategic and so smart. And everyone has a different sort of strategy. They'll read stuff. You just Google how to negotiate. And some people are like, don't ask for, don't split it down the middle. No. You have to do what's right for you, right? Like, what are you willing? What do you think your value is? And then go after it. However you have to go after it, do it. But just, you got to remember what's right for you. What you're reading online isn't necessarily somebody who is in your shoes. Of course it's not.
Correct. And you got to feel out the situation. Like if it's your first full-time role in sports, maybe you don't feel comfortable yet, and maybe it's just not the right time. But just feel out who the person is that's offering you this role. Feel out like your opportunities, what kind of things you have to weigh, and then just do what's best for you, honestly, because nothing's bad has happened if you ask and they say no. They're going to say, no, I'm sorry, this is the most we can do. And then you have to be like, okay, thank you. And then I'll let you know. So just know that that's worst case scenario, and that's not super scary.
No, it's not. And if it's like, it may not be the right fit for you. You may think that their salary is undervaluing you.
Absolutely.
And you have to make the decision whether or not you want to work at a place that doesn't value you.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Hey, Jahaan here. I hope you're enjoying the interview. I'm sure you are thinking about your own career right now and how you can pull out in front of the pack to take your career to the next level. For 18 years, supporting women in sports has been my favorite part of my career, and I would love to support you. Whether it's joining my free Game of Her Own community or one of my one-on-one coaching programs, I am here for you. Send me a message at jblake@jahaanblake.com or DM me on Instagram @jahaanblake, and let's schedule a time to have a free session. I cannot wait to hear from you. All right, let's get back to why you're here. Okay, so now you're the new girl. You went from a manager to director, got the job interview, killed the negotiation phase, and then now you are director level. And usually game presentation isn't just like, it's not like accounting, right? Like you're going in and you're having big events and big, to-dos, and everything is just different and new. So I know that your superpower is being able to collaborate with your teammates, right? Talk to us a little bit about what was your approach coming in, being the new girl and having to just sort of just assimilate yourself into a new organization.
So something I started to do when I went to that nonprofit was I went on either a walk or a one-on-one meeting or got coffee with every single person I could possibly interact with in my job. And because of that, I understood their responsibilities, how my role interacted with their role. I understood, maybe their preferences or the way they like to work. If it's like they prefer emails over face-to-face or, just different nuances for each person. And it worked so well there that I did the same thing here in Dallas. My first week, I just went through first my department, the people closest to me. I just went through and I put 30 minutes on almost every single person's calendar. And I said, we can take a walk. We can just go in the side room. We can go get coffee. I just want to pick your brain, get to know you. And nobody's going to say no. One, it's a break from their desk. And two, they appreciate, you reaching out because it's daunting. You're new. It's hard to just be like, hey, let's go get coffee. But they appreciate it because they see that you're open to learning about them. You want to work best with them. So whatever ways they see, they function or the best ways they work, they see that you want to know those things and they appreciate that. And so I was only in the office for, I kid you not, like less than a month before quarantine happened. But I spent all that time just talking and getting to know everyone that I could possibly collaborate with. And that really paid off, especially now that I don't see them face to face. And if I hadn't had those meetings and before all this happened, like, I don't think they would know me at all. And I wouldn't know them either. So it's definitely paid off.
I think that's a great idea. What do those meetings, so someone's listening right now, like, I'm going to do that. I'm excited about this idea. What do those meetings look like? Is it just getting to know each other? Is it for you, right? Was it just getting to know each other, or did you have an agenda and sort of like learning more about what they expected from you? Like, there's a lot of ways to play the introduction game when you first get to an organization.
Absolutely. And what I have found is that every meeting has gone differently depending on the person. And so sometimes I go in and they don't initiate anything. And so I say, so like, how long have you been here? Like, what do you like about this place? Or, where were you before here? And then the conversation starts flowing. And then I'll start to bring up, what are ways that you worked with the game presentation person in the past? What are things that the game presentation person before me, what are things that they did well that you loved? And what are things that you wish they would have done differently? And so I just kind of pick their brain. Other times I'll go on a walk or a coffee run and they'll just start going. They just like love to talk. They love to tell you about their experiences at the organization. And I barely have to say much. And listening is like the best tool that you could have because you get to know them the best. And then you'll be like, what about you? Like, where are you from? Like, why are you here? And so it'll just start bubbling and like really turning into something. So everyone is a little bit different, but it kind of helps you understand your coworkers better. And then for the most part, it's getting to know their personality, getting to know how they work, and getting to know how you interact as your role with them in the best way possible.
Okay, good. What's your approach with your new boss?
So that is super interesting. So my boss was on maternity leave during my interview process. And so I almost didn't interview with my supervisor, which scared me. So the CEO of the Wings was the one doing the interviewing because my boss was on maternity leave. And he's the one that offered me the role. And I said, I really appreciate it, but I need to talk to whomever my supervisor is going to be before I can make a decision. And he was like, oh my gosh, absolutely, of course. And he set up a phone call. So even though she was on maternity leave, she was super gracious enough to actually have that phone call with me. And we talked for like 45 minutes. It was less an interview because since I'd already been offered the role and more of me being able to just ask her questions, her management style, how she interacts with the game presentation person, stuff like that. And so that was really, really special. And I felt super comfortable and I was able to accept. Fast forward, and she actually ended up having to leave. Priorities changed when she had babies and she didn't want to be in this role anymore. So only like a few months into my new role, I actually have a new manager, which was super scary because I signed up thinking I would have one manager, and then 4 months later, I have a different one. And so I was super scared. But again, the first thing I did was email her, welcomed her, asked her for a one-on-one, a virtual one, not a coffee run or anything because of what's happening, but it went really well. And we just talked. We just started to get to know each other. And I feel like the more I've connected with any manager I've had, the more they're able to understand me, my workload, what issues I have to encounter, how she can help me tackle those and be in my corner and support me. And that has made all the difference.
Going back to the interview process, you said what you wanted. It was important for you to accept the job. You needed to meet with who your boss was going to be, even though she was on maternity leave. And you spoke up and asked for what you wanted.
Yes.
That's fantastic. And then you were proactive when you found out you had a new manager.
Yes.
So one of the first things you did was request a meeting so you guys could connect.
100%. And like I wasn't a part of the interview process for the new manager, which I don't know what employees are a part of that process, but it was scary because I didn't know much about her. And so I was just worried, which anybody would be. And so I was like, the only way you're going to get rid of this fear is if you just reach out to her and find out more about her yourself. So. Yes,
exactly. Instead of making up this story,
yes,
in your head, you just got rid of all the fear, all the questions, and just did it. So that's fantastic. So talk to me a little bit. I know that you have a staff, correct? And you are very passionate about making sure your staff is happy. And it sounds to me that you just love working for them and making sure that they are in a position to do their job well. Did I get that right?
Yes.
So talk to us a little bit about just your approach when you first got there and just some strategies or tactics that you use to make sure that your team is happy.
So here's a little bit different. I will say that I have a staff, but they're all part-time. So because game presentation is like working games only, it's a little bit different. I have worked at other organizations where I like directly oversaw full-time people. And the biggest thing I can do for those individuals is like constantly ask them what they are wanting to get out of this experience, because most of the people below me, I was in their position. I was a part-time worker working on game days only, but I really wanted experience doing, this certain thing, but no one ever gave it to me because they're either like the opportunities weren't there, or I was too afraid to speak up, or I wasn't sure how to go about getting those opportunities. So one of the biggest things I do is I say, hey, like, what is your opinion of the situation? Do you think we're doing this right? Do you have any suggestions on how we could do this better? And that was one of the first things I did when I started is I called all the part-time staff from last year and I introduced myself. I said, hey, I'm the new game presentation person. Give me a rundown of last season or however many seasons you've worked for us. And, tell me what's good, what's working. Tell me like some suggestions maybe that we could change, and I'll see if it's possible. And that really helped because I felt like, one, they felt like they could come to me with, any issues or ideas that they had. But two, I also just got to know them right off the bat, even though we haven't worked technically any games together yet, which is pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm. So you, by listening, you just have established trust. That's the first thing you went after, is what I'm hearing, correct?
Yes. Listening, trust, and then also letting them know you get out of this job what you put in. That's like one of my biggest things that I tell them. I was like, if you show up every game, go the extra mile, ask me what more you can do. Like, I'm going to be like, oh my God, list me as a reference. Look, I found this opportunity. I'm sending it your way. Like, it always is like, goes both ways. But if somebody is just like coming, doing the bare minimum, shows up late once or twice, I'm much less likely to, put my neck out there for them if there's an opportunity or if they need me as a reference or whatever. So it's just, I always tell them, like, the more you put into a job, I swear the more you're going to get out of it, experience-wise and connections-wise. So it just works both ways.
This is good stuff. All right. So talk to me a little bit about your experience, right? Everyone talks about it's a conversation that happens all the time. Everyone's talking about women or men in sports and how it's male dominated and we want to change it. And I'm curious as to what your experience has been like.
It's actually been crazy. I feel like I've been very blessed in the sense that I've had some really good female role models in sports. And so I was kind of a little, not naive, but I was a little bit like shielded from, lack of diversity, because at Florida, my first boss was a female and she ran the department for the marketing and promotions department. And I was like, so cool. I want to be just like her. Like, she's a boss and I love it. And so, but then I went to Clemson and the whole marketing department was male. And there was not a lot of females, and I loved Clemson. I loved all my coworkers, but it was my first kind of experience like, oh, wow, like there really aren't that many here. I wonder if this is just like here, if this is more places. And then I get to Stanford. My boss is female, which I love, but then I did a kind of assessment of all the administrative staff, and the portion that were men to female really was not very equal at all. And that's when I started to really look into professional sports, like the lack of diversity, being a woman in sport and that whole topic. And I was like, my eyes were open. And so I kind of talked to my husband about it a little bit. I was like, I've never really maybe I've just been naive and, quote unquote, ignorance is bliss, but I've never noticed it before. And now that I have, I'm like, whoa, this is a big deal. Like, even coaching wise, you see all these female sports being coached by men. And a lot of the sports that I worked with were female sports and the coaches were men. And I was just like, how odd? Like, I'm not odd, but just like, oh my gosh, why have I never recognized this before? And so the more I worked, it became very eye-opening to me. And then I remember one game at Stanford, it became very eye-opening to me. I was running a basketball game and I came in to do like a pre-show run through where we run through the script and everything that I've created for the game. And I looked around the production room of everybody. It was like cameramen, everybody that was on, like the operators, the switchers for the video board, the audio people, everybody that basically I'm on headset with telling them what to do. Every single person was a male. And I was the only female. And I was the one directing them, telling them what to do. I mean, it felt really good. And not that like, I was like, oh, cool, I'm the only woman in this room and I'm in charge of all of you. I didn't feel like that, but I was just like, wow, there are no other females in this room, which is kind of sad, but it's cool that the one female that is in this room is the one that's running the show. It was this very like kind of goosebumps, but also like eye-opening moment for me. And after that, I kind of spent some time like looking into what organizations I could be a part of, like women in sports organizations. And even my work, Stanford started a group called, Women at Stanford in the athletic department, and I joined it. And so there was just like little things I started doing to see like what I could do more, how I could make a difference. Anytime a female in the sports industry asked me questions or, wanted advice, I was like, oh, I'm there. Tell me what you need. Ask me any questions. It became a bigger priority for me than it ever had been before.
I love all of your experiences, right? So it sounds like you went from one extreme to the other. I know that feeling. My first boss in baseball was female. And like, same thing. I was just like, all right, like this is a great first experience, Yep. And like, she was tough. But I know for a fact I would not be where I am or who I am today if it wasn't for her. So it's such a great first experience. So thinking about being in the room, and sometimes women can be intimidated in that situation, right? So it sounds like to me, you probably crushed that situation when you were in charge of all of the men. But what's one thing if women are feeling discouraged or intimidated about being the only female and feeling like, a lot of times we hear like, I feel like I have to prepare extra. I have to work harder to show them that I belong here. What's one thing you would tell them to do so they don't feel intimidated?
It's such a good question because I keep thinking about this one experience that I had. I allowed my sister, she came to visit me at Stanford. And I was about to run a volleyball game. And I said, come with me to the production meeting. Like, it'll be fun. You'll see what I do. You guys never really understand what I do, and you'll have a good time. And she said, okay. And so she comes and we run through the stuff. And, I'm asking to see things on the board. I'm asking like, specifying what I want at certain moments. And then afterwards I go, what did you think? Like, did you find it cool? She's like, I thought you were kind of a bitch. And I was like, and I was like, wait, what? And she was just like, I guess that's harsh. I just meant, it sounded like you were a little mean. And I like got really upset. And I went to my husband who works on that side of things, the technical side. And I was like, does your staff, like all the audio and video people, think I'm a bitch? Is that what they think of me? And like, I got so in my head, and he was just like, no, they do not. They are more on their shit when you run a show than when others run a show, because they know that you care more. They want to do it absolutely perfect, but I don't know why that correlates to bitch. If a male were to come in and do the same things you did, they would just be like, oh, wow, he's on top of it. He might be a little bit of like a strict guy, but like he's just a perfectionist and he knows what he wants. But for some reason, if a woman comes in and does it, she's a bitch, or she's just like a hard ass or whatever. And so the more I thought about that, I was like, yeah. And and I just felt like that was such a lesson for me, because I want women, when they're going in, to not feel like they need to hold back or be super nice or super smiley, or just be like, hey, I'm sorry, but do you mind if we could please do it this way instead of this way? No, you're in charge. Say, hey, this is what I want at this moment. Thank you. Like, always thank them and appreciate their work. But, you don't have to be super smiley and pleasing all the time, which is something like that really shook me because I thought I was like, oh my God, no, people aren't going to like me. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's such a not a good mindset to have when going into your job.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I don't know your husband, but I like him. I like that he put that into perspective for you.
He really did, because that's all I could think about. I was like, oh my God, people don't like me. And he's like, any other person, especially a male, that would go in and do the same things, they would be like, oh, whatever, that's just how he is. But if a girl does it, it's like, I don't like her. She's like mean and sassy and a hard ass. And it's like, why are all these adjectives tied to women and not to men?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Ooh, all right. So tell me this, if you had to do one thing differently, right, looking back at your career, you're not even 30 yet. I won't say your age because that's you're not even 30 yet. Looking back at your career, what's one thing you would do differently?
I would say I am a little upset at myself for not taking as many risks and just not being as willing to speak up as I should have been. So being a younger female, because I got lucky. I was an assistant director in sports for D1. Stanford is a great place to be, and their athletic program is astounding. But because of that, being the game presentation person, coaches can very easily dictate what they want. And coaches and players have strong personalities, especially ones that work in those, very high profile sports like football or basketball. And for me, I was this new girl on the block, and I just wanted, people to be like, oh, I really like Caitlin. I like working with Caitlin. Like, let's keep working with Caitlin. And so they would suggest things, or I would try something new and they would say, no, we don't want to do that. And I would just be like, okay. I would just kind of not be a yes man, but almost so. And especially during my first season when I was new, people didn't know me yet. I was still kind of new to the game presentation role. And so coaches would say things or, doubt my abilities. And I would have to either go to my boss and be like, hey, they're giving me a hard time. And then she would have to go stand up for me, which I'm like, why can't I stand up for myself? Why couldn't I say no to them? Say, I'm the professional in this field. You're the professional when it comes to coaching. I'm not telling you how to run plays. So if I say this is going to work better at this time during the game than at this time, just believe me. I promise I know what I'm doing. So when it came to certain promotions or certain game presentation elements, I felt like I just should have been more confident in my abilities. It's hard to say that when you're 25 and you just want everyone to like you, but I do regret it a little bit. I felt like I could have made a bigger impact with some of those student athletes and some of those teams if I had just felt a little bit more confident in my abilities and not tried to be such a people pleaser. You recognized what it was, right? You weren't speaking up, using your voice, and you recognize that. And so now how do you make sure, because you're doing something right? Just because you don't use your voice here and there doesn't mean your career is over, right? You're at this director level, made the jump. What's important about that is you made the jump from nonprofit, no professional sports experience as a manager to a director. That's a big deal. So again, congrats to you. Thank you.
What are you doing now that you are making sure that you're using your voice? How are you pushing yourself to do that?
So I catch myself often in meetings where I'll have an idea and I'll be like, I don't know if that's a good idea. I just won't say it. I'm still a new person. And the more I think about it, I'll catch myself being like, why are you doubting yourself? Just say it. Because the worst that could happen is that they're like, no, we've tried that before and it didn't work here. Or maybe we'll put it on the back burner or flesh it out a little bit more for us and we'll see if it can work. Anytime I feel like I haven't suggested something, somebody else has suggested it. And then of course they're the ones that get the credit for it because they're the ones who had, the power, the strength, the confidence to actually say it. And so I'm always just like, if you don't say it, somebody else is going to say it. And then they're going to get the recognition. They're going to, get all of the credit for it because you were too afraid to do anything about it. So now I find myself in meetings, just checking myself in my brain, coming up with an idea and being able to say it and saying, hey, from a game presentation standpoint, I've worked at these 3 different schools and I know that this works really well. These are my experiences and this is why. And it actually just happened, my work needed this scripting program. Mm-hmm. So you write scripts out, and it's basically a special software that uses it. And we didn't have it here in Dallas. And I was like, you just write your scripts like on Excel or Word or what? I'm not sure what they used in the past, but it just didn't seem very efficient. And I like pitched it to my boss, and she was like, I don't know, like, I don't see the value in it. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. Like, this is not a good idea. But then I was like, I don't know. I had to check myself. I had to say, no, prove to them that it's a valuable thing and that this would save you a lot of time and a lot of effort, and show them why it's valuable. So I set up a meeting with the scripting service by myself. I told them to give me a full rundown of like why it's helpful, how much time it saves people. I reached out to old places that I worked at, asked them to send me a script, asked them to show me like what they used. And then I sent it all to my boss in this like long email. And she agreed. She said, hey, this is great. Thank you for showing me this. And so she's like, we don't need it this season, obviously, but next season we can use this. And so it was like the perfect example of me, like, she kind of shut me down at first, but if you just put in the work, if you just show why you or whatever you're pitching is valuable, it's going to go a long way.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Because I was going to ask you, when do you know to push back? But it's like, you knew I was going to ask you that, and you just answered. So like, you heard the no and you said, okay. And then you walked back, you're like, no, wait, I know this is good. I know my idea is good. I'm going to try again. And what I hear you saying is that you built the case for it, right? Before you went in, it was like, here's what we need. And it probably there wasn't much depth to the presentation of that. And so then you went back and you built your case.
Right.
And you won.
and that's what I would say is like, sometimes you're going to get shot down, and other times people are going to be like, I don't think so. And you just have to understand, go in with research, go in prepared, and just don't get discouraged the first no that you hear. Because I used to. People would say like, no, we don't want to do that. Or a coach would say, that's not a good idea. And I would just believe them and be like, like, I'm never going to win. And if you actually just take the time, it's not going to be 100% of the time you're going to win, but you know, the more effort you put in and the more, like you said, a case that you can make for your ideas and, you know, what you are trying to go for, it's definitely going to pay off.
Yes. I completely agree. And let me ask you this. If she said no the second time, what would you have done?
If she would have said no the second time, I still probably would have kept fighting. After some point, I would have kind of asked her what her reasonings were for saying no. Because if I can understand, like if it's a budget reason, if it's a, you know, like whatever her reasons are, I want to know. So then I can try to counteract with, well, then maybe we can take money out of this area. Or well, then maybe, you know, I would just find a counter argument to kind of help my case. So if you can understand why they might be hesitant to saying yes, then that's kind of going to be your starting off point and really help you kind of go towards your goal.
Yes. And you learn so much. So I love that. And you obviously didn't have to do that, but I love that approach because you learn so much about the business and budgets and where that idea falls on the priority list. So you may have to push a little bit just to get an understanding from your boss, right? So it's just like, help me understand why this is a no. I respect your decision. I've come to you twice, but I'd like to learn a little bit. So 100%. You can kind of find out like where this falls on the priority list and, well, what's above it, right?
Yeah.
And again, and you're right, you can learn too, like, oh, it's a budget issue. Okay, I know what I'm going to do next year to get this in, right?
Exactly. And then that's literally like the best advice because like even at Stanford, like I wanted a wireless camera so bad because like in-game presentation is like vital to crowd shots. So having like somebody being able to take a camera into the crowd is huge. We would ask every year and every year they would say no. And they would be like, what do we need to do to get a wireless camera? They're like, we just don't have the budget. Like you're going to have to figure something out. So then we went to sponsorship and we said, hey, maybe we could strike a deal with these camera companies. And so just like finding ways to like maybe get to your end goal. And it might not have been the way that you thought you were going to get there, but understanding the reasoning is like the best starting off point.
All right. This was fantastic. So if someone wanted to get in touch with you, what would be the best way?
Yeah, so probably the best way is email. I love emails. My email is chartley@dallaswings.com. So chartley@dallaswings.com. I'm also on Twitter. I'm not a great tweeter, but I'm on Twitter. So they can come follow me there. I think it is at Caitlin Hart. Yes. So at Caitlin_HART_. So that's my Twitter. Feel free to tweet me, direct message me, but email is the best way to get in touch with me. I'm always open to answering any questions that you have. The only reason why I got to where I am is because people answered my questions. So anytime somebody reaches out, I'm more than welcome to give them any advice or, have a conversation.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for being such an amazing guest. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. I wish you all the best, and I can't wait to listen.
So what did you think of this episode? Do you know another woman who works or is aspiring to work in sports? Would you do me a favor and share this with them? It would mean so much if together we could support and inspire other women on their journey. And let's stay connected. I love meeting and talking to new people. Follow me on Instagram at Jahaan Blake and join the free Game of Her Own community by visiting jahaanblake.com. I can't wait to meet you.